now. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jared Ledbetter. I am the technology specialist for the Maine State Library. I am joined by Beth Christ, who is our special projects director and has organized a wonderful series on our digital resources, including the Digital Maine Library. And she will be talking a little bit more about some of the things that are coming for Digital Maine Library, while I am here to present you with effectively the trailer for the Digital Maine Library Cinematic Universe, the DMLCU. And we'll be doing a very brief overview for you, the discerning librarians. And I hope that this will be of use to you, but just so that we can start off on the right foot, I want to establish a couple rules of engagement. If you're not familiar with the tools of Zoom, there is the opportunity to raise your hand using the reactions tool. So if you want to be called upon, you want to interrupt, you can choose either to raise your hand or simply to unmute and ask your questions. We do hope that this will be more of a conversation. So if you do have questions, I will be happy to answer them. And I know that we have some people who are in attendance today that probably could teach this as well as I could. So I might ruthlessly call upon those individuals in the event that I want to pick on them, which is kind of really what it's about. And speaking of which, one of those individuals has just joined us, Tim Pellet from Maine Infinite. If none of you know Tim, Tim is the equivalent to the Wizard of Oz behind the Digital Maine Library. He handles all the mysterious stuff behind the curtain. And he just joined us, and I presume it's him that we have to thank for Digital Maine Library actually now coming back, and we'll see whether or not it stays with us. And as I mentioned, Beth is with us as well. So we do have quite a body of knowledge and expertise in the group, but I would also like to just get a sense of where you all are at. And if you don't mind, why don't we ask a couple questions? Can everyone see the polls that were just, thank you, Beth. I hope everyone else can see the polls. If you would like to select an answer from each of those, that would be fantastic. Just want to get a sense as to who is in attendance today. And for those of you who are watching the recording, we're simply asking what sort of library the attendees are coming from and what their level of experience and comfort is with online research resources like the Digital Maine Library. Getting some good answers. Okay. So I think we have almost everyone having answered. I know at least one person hasn't answered that could probably answer 5 on the second question. So you know who you are. Don't even try to hide it. That is everyone having answered. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and let everyone see the results. So we have quite a few public librarians here. More than a few of you are academics. A couple school librarians, welcome. And of course, there are the special ones amongst you. We welcome you as well. And I'm glad to see that many of you are here and have at least a level of familiarity with the Digital Maine Library. And some of you have chosen to be right at the dead center and a little bit on the very bottom and the very close to the very top. I'm hoping that we'll be able to, for those of you who are attending, that we'll be able to take you from a 1 or a 2 up to a 3. But really, I do want to reinforce, this is going to be an overview. There's a lot under the surface, and we have a lot of ground to cover today. So please, if you have questions, especially questions that you feel will be pertinent to your school or your university or college or to your library, please ask them. And if we can't get you an immediate answer, we will follow up with you after the webinar today. So again, just want to remind people, please, if you do have any questions, share them. If you have answers to questions, I'm happy for you to jump in as well if you know that you can contribute to the conversation. I love that one. So why don't we go ahead and get started with the webinar. And Beth, I'd like you to just jump in and talk a little bit about what's coming up for the Digital Maine Library, if that's okay.
Absolutely, thank you. So we are having, this is a first training of several that we're going to have this fall. So this is the, just to get you familiar with Digital Maine Library as a whole. And then we're going to be taking a deeper dive into some of the specific resources within Digital Maine Library. So I'm going to paste in the trainings that we're having in October. And these are based around our STEM and Libraries Month, which is October. So these are some that we're having coming up. We have one here first. And this is with a Gale trainer, Stacy Nimblo. And so we're going to be exploring the natural world, empowering young minds with Nat Geo Kids and Gale in Context Environmental Studies on October 5th. And then we're having one more with EBSCO database. And that is this one here. And so for those, you're going to be register. If you're interested in those, you're going to be registering directly with those trainers at our vendors. And so again, this is just a deeper dive into 3 of our resources that have to do with STEM and Libraries Month. There's some more for November, and I would just say, well, please watch the MeLibs list. For those, we'll have a lot more information coming for those. And is this a place also to talk about the task forces and the survey coming up?
Why don't we hold off on the task force just for a little bit, if you don't mind?
That's fine.
We'll get to that in a little bit, but I'd really like to jump in. And I know a couple people just joined us. Welcome to those who have joined recently. We'll be jumping right into the webinar. Little caveat that Digital Maine Library has been persnickety today. So it needs to have its ego sort of massaged so that it will cooperate with us. I hope to do a little bit of live training today, but that depends on factors that are entirely outside my control. Thank you in advance, Tim, for the help that you have provided. So why don't we go ahead and just jump forward to talk about the agenda. One of the first things I think feels most important to talk about is, why do you even care about Digital Maine Library? Why is it important to us as librarians? Because that's not an obvious answer. There's no obvious answer to that, in my opinion. So many librarians will resort to those search engines that will remain unnamed. They might start with the letter G, but beyond that, you know who you are. If you're here, hopefully that means you are finding that there are other resources and other ways of answering questions. And that Digital Maine Library is one of those ways to do so, with a great deal of utility, and makes it easy for your students to access, and is curated. And I'll get into those points in a little bit. I also want to make sure that we know how to get there from here. Busting out my native Maine accent here. Furthermore, if you are finding it difficult using Digital Maine Library, some basic search tips and how to navigate around the resources there. And then finding the things that you can take with you from the Digital Maine Library, including further training resources and opportunities, including ways to promote Digital Maine Library. So why don't we go ahead and take the next step into why do you even care about the Digital Maine Library? I break this down into 3 C's. The first is cost, because we make these resources free to Maine residents, even resources that are normally hidden behind paywalls. And again, it's not that we're finding some magical way of getting around paying money. We're just paying them for the citizens of Maine so that they don't have to. So there is a cost savings for many of these resources by using Digital Maine. That includes some of the common newspapers in Maine, as well as newspapers and magazines around the nation and the globe, and a great other many resources that would otherwise be of some cost to you or your patrons. Convenience, I feel like Digital Maine Library is very accessible. We put a lot of effort into lowering barriers. For those of you who were around when Marvel, the predecessor to Digital Maine Library, was a thing, Marvel had some barriers to entry, and it was very difficult in some cases to get into Marvel. And those have largely been addressed through things that we'll talk about in short order. And then finally, and I think this is one way that Digital Maine Library really stands above many of the popular search engines, is that it's curated. We get, with our normal search engines, we may feel very comfortable with the results, but the question I ask is, should you feel comfortable with the results of your search engines? Especially given the fact that many of them, the algorithms lock you into a limited set of resources that are out there. And as librarians, we like to get information that covers a broad spectrum. So having that information curated ahead of time, rather than trusting in an algorithm to get us the right information, is one of the major benefits of using the Digital Maine Library. And that really, I feel, applies to any students that you may have to show how to do research. And that's students from early grades all the way up through college and lifelong learners. The notion of digital literacy is something that we care very much about as librarians. So resources like the Digital Maine Library become increasingly important to us. So I'll break these down a little bit further by going into the weeds. I like to talk about the cost portion because, again, I want to reinforce that online newspapers, including for those in Maine, Portland Press Herald, the Lewiston Sun Journal, the Bangor Daily News, these are all accessible through the Digital Maine Library. And they're, generally speaking, accessible the day of publication. There are some gaps in the history here and there, but you can access articles the day of publication. If you know what you're looking for, you can go right in, or you can browse the magazine itself, magazine or newspaper, I should say. So there is a real benefit to getting access to news that's otherwise hidden behind paywalls. Popular magazines, thousands upon thousands of them, that oftentimes have costly subscriptions. You can get access to those through the Digital Maine Library. For the genealogists among you or your community, the Ancestry Library Edition, and I do feel the need to be a little pedantic and say Library Edition versus Ancestry.com, because a lot of people want to go to Ancestry.com, but it's really Ancestry Library that is the site that we offer access to, and it has to be done within the school or library itself. That's one of the few resources that's really hidden behind a specific IP address, which is the location of your school or library on the internet. So that's another great resource that you don't have to pay for, just need to get people into the building. Value Line Research Center for people who are doing financial research into stocks. They can get access to that. That's otherwise a very expensive resource. And I believe that there is a limitation of 5 simultaneous users, but that's still very, very good for a resource that would cost a lot of money to get independently. So Value Line is one of those very helpful resources for people who wanted to do financial research. And then Chilton Auto Repair Manuals is another great example. If you're the do-it-yourselfer and you don't mind getting a little elbow grease when you're repairing your cars. And in Maine, I think we understand quite a lot about self-sufficiency. Being able to look at a specific car manual for your vehicle and get some important technical information about how to maintain and repair your vehicle. All of that is built right into Digital Maine Library. Convenience of Digital Maine Library, I think it kind of speaks for itself because we package quite a few resources into this one location. We cover a very broad gamut of topics, and we make it so that all you have to do is go to this one place. And the searching is not, it's not something that you have to go super deep like old search engines with directories. You can do that, but we have multiple ways of narrowing your searches right from the get-go so that you get quickly to the information that you're looking for. Furthermore, I think that there's a lot of added value, especially for educators. And that's for teachers. I think this resource does tend to have so many teaching additions. There are activities, there are teaching kits or units already prepared for you. So I'd like to think that for teachers who are aware of this, it does actually lend itself to a pre-packaged unit that pairs well with one or more of the resources through Digital Maine Library. And it's mobile friendly. So if you have your smartphone, you have your tablet, you can access Digital Maine Library right from that device rather than having to sit at a computer. And that's a big plus in today's mobile world. Finally, the curation side of it. I think we can all agree that when we're searching for certain types of information, it becomes important to know that you'll have information that has been researched by experts. And that's really a big deal, especially when you start talking about health information. If you go down the rabbit hole of searching on a normal search engine, there's not a great deal of guarantee that you're getting the best information. Whereas when you search through a resource like the Digital Maine Library, you are getting very good information. That covers a lot of categories like health, like legal resources, like business. All of that's important to have somebody with expertise aggregate that information for you. And that's what we've done here. Furthermore, in creating the Digital Maine Library, we really took pains to make sure that we weren't misrepresenting how the information was provided or made available. We made sure that we asked teachers, K through 12, college teachers, public librarians, under what context would you find this information useful? Is it useful to the public? Is it useful to middle schoolers? Is it accessible to elementary school? And we, through that process of getting feedback through Maine librarians, we devised a tagging system that makes this information much more readily sortable. And I'll get to that in just a little bit. And I want to remind everyone the G word, while not technically a 4-letter word, it's not the final word when it comes to getting trustworthy search results. Not going to lie, it's useful, but it's also good to keep in mind that there is a point where doing research probably needs to go through a curated resource like the Digital Maine Library, rather than taking your chances with an algorithm on the wide open net. It looks like we already have a question. What are the steps for setting up a username and password at the library? When they're in the library, Betsy, they should be able to access Ancestry Library. Outside the library, they can't get access to Ancestry. And more specifically, I want to say Ancestry Library. They need to actually come into the library in order to access Ancestry Library. There was a time during the pandemic when when Ancestry Library said, we'll open it up to people across the state because people aren't going into libraries. But if your library has been identified and passes geo-authentication, and I'll talk about that in a second, then you should be identified and you should be given a clear pass. And if you aren't able to get that, that's when we have a conversation with Tim Pellet. Tim, you want to wave? Say hello. Tim is actually the wunderkind of making these things work. He's the one that if your library does not authenticate properly to Digital Maine Library resources, he can work with you to clear that process. So if you have any questions about that, well, Tim is in the chat, so if we can work with you on that, or we can set up a conversation in email after the webinar. Barb, you should be identified using library Wi-Fi because it still passes through an identified what's called the IP address range. So you shouldn't have any problems with your library Wi-Fi getting onto resources like Digital Maine Library. If you do, again, that's one of those, let's troubleshoot this and figure things out from there. But all libraries, especially libraries that are in MSLN, that's a pretty easy solve. It's the schools and libraries are kind of outside MSLN, or in some circumstances, schools or libraries that are near the border of the state that may need some additional support with geo-authentication. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I want to keep moving on with the library. Actually, speaking about getting there from here, geo-authentication is kind of the wonder approach that we have used so that if you are identified as coming from an IP address within Maine, again, sort of it recognizes that your computer, or more importantly, the service provider that's giving your computer internet access comes from within Maine, then Tim Pellet at Maine Infonet has taken pains to make sure that you can authenticate using geo-authentication. That means you don't need to log in, and that means you should be able to access these resources right from your library, or in most cases, right from home. Again, there is a slight catch with certain libraries that are very, very near the border. If their ISP, the service provider, happens to reside in New Hampshire, that they end up having to be singled out and added to lists that way. But by and large, it works very, very well, and there are almost no complications, except when schools are getting started up at the beginning of every school year. There's usually a few that have gone through some changes, and Tim does a great job at ironing those out before too terribly long. So I think I answered Barb's and Betsy's questions, but again, if not, let's open up the conversation after the webinar and see if we can't get some resolution for you guys. For those circumstances where there's a complication with geo-authentication, there is also, for many patrons and libraries, if you're a Mills library, a Minerva library, an Ursus library, or Portland Public Library card holder, you can sign in using your last name and your library barcode. That will also get you past. So that's probably most used when your mobile device is set to not report your location. Because if it's unable to report your location, then the geo-authentication can't identify that you're from Maine. So that is a good way of getting around that little hurdle. But if you choose not to use that, or you don't have a library barcode from there, or and I talk about this with some trepidation, but you can also create a Digital Maine Library account if you travel outside of Maine. For example, if you have students and they're going on vacation, but you've given them homework for the vacation time, then you can actually have them set up Digital Maine Library accounts, and they can still gain access by logging in through an account. Now that isn't super, because now they have to have a username and password that they remember, but it's actually pretty good given the fact that 95% of the time they don't need to do any of that. So Barb, the Mills account should log in with the barcode, even if you're outside of Maine. Tim can correct me on that, but that library barcode authentication does not rely upon geo-authentication to get you past. So if they wanted to use their library barcode while in Florida, that is a way around it. Otherwise, they can create an account and sign into Digital Maine Library that way. Any other questions at this point? Please feel free to jump in, ask your question, raise your hand, jump into the chat, any of the above. Beth, is it 11 seconds I'm supposed to wait? Beth is one of those people that knows that you have to hawkishly watch all the faces to make sure that you're paying rapt attention for 11 seconds before you move on. So given that no one has asked me any questions, all right, I'm getting the thumbs up from Beth. I can move on. All right. Maybe if you don't like any of those methods, you don't necessarily want to use Digital Maine Library, but you want to customize something for your school or library, you can do that. You can use permanent database links that you could then put onto your own web page and go directly to some of these independent resources. So let's say you have a genealogy page. Rather than force your genealogists to go to Digital Maine Library and then find Ancestry Library, you put it onto the desktop of your computers, and then boom, they can take it from there. You can set it up as a bookmark, for example, and that will let them get right into Ancestry Library. You can also, if you want specific access to a journal or an article, especially if you're a teacher that wants to cite a specific article and point your students in that direction, you can actually permalink the article itself. And there are instructions for doing all of this right on the Digital Maine Library website. So those are actually pretty straightforward ways of getting to these resources in a more specific fashion. Beth, thank you for jumping in with the permalinks. That's for the journals and whatnot, but there are also database links for the specific databases that are included in Digital Maine Library. And like I said, there are even more ways, including something that I mentioned earlier, tags. We associate tags with each one of these resources that themselves have URLs. So if you are a middle school teacher, having the middle school collection of resources, having a URL or a link that's immediately available to take your students to that part of Digital Maine Library, you can do that very easily. Or if you want to get, let's just say, super fancy with the whole chrome and the flames coming out the side, you can create your own Gale Pages resource for many of the, not all of, but many of the resources on Gale Pages, and create your own version of a Digital Maine Library as Okay, so moving right along. So how to get there again? The authentication, the geo authentication is all about, is your service provider in Maine? If not, let's try one of the other methods, including for many library users, a library barcode from some of the largest consortia in the state, from Portland Public Library, from Ursus, from Mills, from Minerva. And if none of that is going to work, an account can be created, but then it will work anywhere. We try to keep that sort of, I mentioned earlier, a little trepidation there, just because we're under agreement to try to keep out-of-state access to only Maine residents, and it's something that we take pride that we haven't let the cat out of the bag. So as much as we can, we don't share this information on as a broad sort of extension to the world, because then the world would try to get on. But it is a good tool to have in the niche circumstance where people need to get access and they're going to be traveling out of the state, or they even live out of the state for part of the year. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the search aspect of this. There are two major components to searching the Digital Maine Library. The first involves a tool called the Sift and Sort. The Sift and Sort tool is unique to the Digital Maine Library in that it allows you to search or narrow your search by subject, resource type, and audience. And then that narrows the available resources to those that fit all of those conditions. And then you can select the one that seems like it will work for you. So it gets you to the resource very, very quickly. And that's where you really start the actual search process, is once you've found the resource. But the Sift and Sort narrows it down to the resource very, very, very quickly. Alternately, if you really do like that whole search bar approach to life, and you don't mind sifting through hundreds of thousands of potential hits, well, that's where the multi-database search tools can come in, of which we have a couple. We have Gale Power Search and the EBSCO Discovery Service, both of which do allow for full text searching. And then from there, you can choose to get more specific and really tweak the parameters of your search by using advanced search techniques, including narrowing by keyword or subject or publication or the date of the article that you're looking for. And there's a lot of power here, but it's also, you end up searching generally quite a few articles in order to find really specifically what you're looking for. So it's extremely comprehensive, but it also doesn't necessarily make things 100% easier for you. We'd like we'd hope that you would find what you're looking for by starting with a single database resource, and then if you need to, back off onto the multi-database resource and go from there. So if you still haven't found what you're looking for, let's try the Sift and Sort. There are, as you can see up here, there are several different ways of sifting and sorting, including by subject. And I've listed a number of the potential categories of subject that you can include. It really breaks down to, I think, a lot of different options for you. So you can quickly narrow to government or health or literature, and then you can choose to add further limiters by using the resource type. If you know that you want to only find magazine articles, then you can do that. If you know that you really are just trying to limit this to newspaper articles, then you can do that. Or online resources, you can do that. All that is just ways of narrowing your search further. I will observe, though, if you use 3 different ways of narrowing your search, sometimes that means you'll get no results. That can happen, and that's just good to keep in mind. 2 results or 1 or 2 results may be enough so that you can find a good resource to then do your actual search. But again, narrowing to one of those individual tags is very helpful to get you started. That's why I call Sift and Sort your new bestie. And hopefully you will agree that it becomes your absolute bestie and you share all the latest goss and really incorporate it into how you do research. As I mentioned before, tags are actually extremely useful because not only are they how we use Sift and Sort to narrow your selection, but they become their own URL, their own web address. So if you know that you are constantly doing a search against middle school resources, as shown on the slide, that URL is something that you can link to directly. And that can be just a shortcut for you. You go straight there, you've done the Sift and Sort effectively by just going to that address. And that takes a step out of your search process. And it makes it easier for all the students and your community members that you're helping on this way. So if you know that you're really serving college students, mostly having links to college resources right off the bat is just shaving a step off the process. Any questions so far? I'm not that good, guys. There's got to be at least one question. Come on. I've got this little mental countdown now that Beth has indoctrinated us to thinking 11 seconds. Okay, well, I guess I am that good. So let's just go ahead and keep on keeping on. I like to sort of look at our 2 multi-database search tools as they're not really in competition. I just like the head-to-head approach. Gale Search does a great job at allowing you to select from Gale resources. And so it still gives you a lot, but not as much as the Discovery Service, because EBSCO Discovery Service also umbrellas over the Gale research stuff. So it's the end all of what we have, but generally fewer is better when it comes to doing research. You don't want to get 10,000 articles for your doctorate papers. You know, that would be a lot to defend. So maybe you want to just back it off and get, you know, maybe 20, 30, something that's a little bit less ambitious. So the Gale Power Search is a very good tool and has a lot in common with all of the Gale search engines. So once you're familiar with anything Gale, you're familiar with everything Gale. EBSCO collects not only Gale, but a lot of other stuff as well. So like I said, it really is about as comprehensive as it can get for the Digital Maine Library. They're both really, really good, and they both have many of the same tools, including full text limiters, so that you're not getting abstracts for articles that you then have to try to interlibrary loan, for example. You can, if you're doing serious research, choose to limit only to peer-reviewed journals. You can narrow it down to specific publications. And one of Beth's favorite tools is doing the concept of visual mapping of searches, which is just a great way of seeing dozens and dozens of results all packaged into a single sort of graphic. I think it's kind of just a fun way of getting people engaged, especially with students. They really like the visual aspect to doing searches rather than just having a long list of stuff to scroll through. Concept and visual mapping can be very helpful as well. All right, so if no one minds, I'd love to go to live to, what do you call it? Digital Maine Library. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second and reshare the Digital Maine Library. Can everyone see where I'm at? Perfect. Oh, I think we have a question in chat? I'm sorry, I missed that. No, I think we're good. All right. So again, here's Digital Maine Library. Is it live? I really hope it's live. Let me just check. It's live. Okay, phew. This was my panic moment about 20 minutes before the webinar, discovering that Digital Maine Library was not live. So of course I emailed Tim saying, Tim, need your help, and he helped. So that's good. We have a little bit of a carousel here that just goes through some of the more pertinent information that we'd like people to see. But like I said, here's your new bestie. So to use this tool, you can choose one or more of the drop-down options. And just to give you a scope of how many resources we're talking about here, I'm just going to scroll down. I know this probably looks terrible on video, but needless to say, it's a lot. So I'm going to go right back to the top. You have a couple other buttons here, including the A to Z button and the Z to A button. So if you want to start at the bottom, you click that, and now all of a sudden you're starting in the W's. So all the stuff that's at the bottom is at the top, up is down, right is wrong, etc. And if you want to reset where you are, if you just want to basically start from scratch, here is the reset button that will bring us back to relative normality, as much as normality occurs to any librarian. So let's go ahead and just look through some of these subjects. I'm just going to give an example of, why don't we start searching for health resources? But I want it to be specific, because I want to do health resources for a high school audience. And all of a sudden, I am down to 5 resources from the over 100 resources that we had before. So this is a really good way of, again, narrowing at a very, very specific way down to something that would be otherwise very cumbersome to search. So let's start with the Health and Wellness Resource Center. This is a good resource for finding anything. Okay. I've clicked. Okay. It's participating. So you immediately get a number of stuff at the very beginning, including browsing of topics. So if you want to learn more about COVID-19, and who doesn't, you can do that. But I want to draw your attention really up here. Let's say you wanted to get some important information about Alzheimer's. You can do just a general text box search, and we're immediately getting into 449 full text documents. You can see them all listed in their glorious way right here, but I'm not certain that that is everything that I want. I mean, we're talking, look at all the different types of stuff up here. There's over 66,000 news articles, 22,000 magazine articles. But again, really trying to narrow down into the full text. But let's try to find something that was published only in 2023. I'm going to use the advanced search, and I'm going to continue my search for Alzheimer's. Oops. But I want to narrow, by the way, keyword, you'll notice that the fields are described a little bit over on the right-hand side. Keyword does not search the entire document, but if we want the entire document searched, we can do that. Choosing and in the event that we want to cross-reference search terms, we can do that. But like I said, I feel like I want to do a publication date. Let's see. Pardon me, I have something in the way. The abstract art, I can't quite read it. Anyway, publication, language, name, start. I know the data is in here somewhere. Is that it? Bear with me. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Publication data is down here. I forgot some research, some search engines have it a little in different places, but let's say we want only those things that were searched in 2023. You can even get as specific as the day. So I only want things that are after January 1st of this year. And now I am down to, well, let's see. Quite a few good ones. I already have January 11th, 2023, September 11th, 2023. So a lot of this is hopefully going to be very useful information. And I could choose to continue narrowing if we wanted. Additionally, like we were talking about earlier, you can use what's called the topic finder if you'd like a more visual way of getting at related information. So if you wanted to do more medical research, this is a very large category. So you'll actually see some of the other categories that are covered by medical research hidden behind this. So if I click further, it breaks it down a little bit further for me. So I might want to be looking for the risks of certain medical research for Alzheimer's. And here are the articles that I have found specifically for that. Now we're down to more like 12 articles, which you'll agree is a much more manageable number for the research on that topic than the thousands, if not millions, that you might find using a traditional search engine. So I tend to like to go to advanced search early, just because I feel like it gives a little bit more control over the search, especially if you're finding tons of resources that have a quality that you want to cancel out by using, for example, the not category. And here, maybe I want to do research on the benefits of milk chocolate, or maybe even different types of chocolate, but not dark chocolate. Let's just see what I can find in terms of chocolate, but not the dark specifically the type of dark chocolate information. So if the article had mentioned dark chocolate, ostensibly it would be not returned as a result. And that's actually good for me because I don't want to get any further articles on dark chocolate. So you can use the different search options under advanced search to really get at the very specifics. I could teach a whole class on how to do search terms and search syntax. Some of the terms here, for example, it tells you if you want to use and or not. It even lets you use things like wildcard characters. So if you are searching libraries, for example, you can use wildcards to get all searches that include either one of those in a single search. If you want to only get the peer-reviewed journals, you can do that. So there's a lot that can go into your search. I don't want to do too deep of a dive into that, just because that is a very, very comprehensive question. So I think, unless anyone has any specific questions with this part, I'd like to go back to, I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the screen, the slideshow. So are you all still with me? All right, if you're all still with me, thank you again for staying as long as you have. Let's go and to talk about what you can take with you. So I showed you a little bit of what a search looked like, but some of what you want to get is you don't want to necessarily read the information right there. You want to be able to access it in other ways, whether it means saving articles to a cloud drive, downloading to your computer, downloading to your device, or in the case of teachers, even interacting through Google Classroom. Gale does enable a lot of those tools, including emailing, downloading, printing. So for example, if you're a research librarian or reference librarian at your location, you can email articles directly to patrons who are asking the question over the phone or by email. You can just put in their email address and send the article directly to them. Or if they'd rather, you can save it to your drive if you're doing a lot of research at once and you're grabbing a ton of articles, save a bunch to your drive, and then attach them all at once to an email to the patron, or even zip them and send them that way. You'll also notice that there's the ability to cite articles through the standard, the most popular citation, what do you call them? The protocols, I guess. And then there are further accessibility. So if you find it hard to read, you can increase the font size. You can even engage a reader for articles. So there are accessibility qualities built into these searches. And of course, you can link directly to the article as well. So there's a lot of ways that you can take the search information and get it out of Digital Maine Library for use elsewhere. When you go to the Digital Maine Library website, there are a couple really, really important things to look at. One of which was getting started with Digital Maine Library, which has a ton of what we've already gone over, including the information about how to create accounts if you're going to be traveling out of state, how to use the sift and sort, how to do persistent linking. But I really want to draw your attention to the Need Assistance button. This is really important for teachers or librarian, anyone who's supporting a teacher who oftentimes, if you're going to be teaching, you want to make certain that these resources are available and that they work. Sometimes teachers don't test it until like 10 minutes before they present. That can be very, very awkward. So it's our hope that if you have any troubles with the Digital Maine Library, that is a great resource, because if you're using that resource, you can either call the Maine State Library and get a live person, or you can use the form, and that is distributed to a number of people, all of whom are very happy to help you out. We encourage, if you know that you're going to need Digital Maine Library for a presentation or a lesson, to test it well ahead of time, so that if there are anything that needs to be ironed out, it's not being ironed out while the class is going, like I nearly had to do with the Digital Maine Library. It's really intended so that you have a very timely response to any issues that you may encounter with the Digital Maine Library. Speaking of Maine Infinite, because again, they do such a great job for us in so many ways. One of those ways is supporting the Digital Maine Library, including with training tools and some additional technical docs that will help with creating your own persistent links or creating database links, or if you have questions about specific resources. They've aggregated all those tools in one place, so I feel like they're pretty great, as evidenced here. They also give DML usage reporting. So some of the usage from your library, for example, can be monitored, and you can see how how Digital Maine Library is being used. I know that there are some restrictions on how that information can be reported. If your patrons are using it from home, of course, that makes it much more difficult to report as attached to your library, but anything that's being used in your library can be reported. We're getting towards the end of the webinar, so I'd like to get a little bit more time. I'd like to have a little bit of time for questions, but I really do want to mention Gale support. Gale does a lot for us, including providing webinars and further training upon request. But they also provide a ton of information, training, promotional materials for anyone who wants to go to their support website. That includes posters, that includes email templates, social media posts, resource guides, lesson plans, live webinars, dead webinars, so on and so forth. There's really a lot to get from going to their Gale support site, and some of which is hidden behind your location ID, but all Maine libraries have one. So finding your location ID is as simple as typing in your library's name. They provide you with that ID, and that opens up some further resources for you. And if you are among the discerning and intrepid librarians who don't mind getting a little technical, there's also Gale admin. And in order to get admin access, you actually do need to contact Gale to get the credentials for signing in. But that does open some doors for you for creating your own back-end resources for Gale. All right. Why don't we take just a couple minutes for Beth to talk about the upcoming database task force. Beth, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. We are currently engaged with a database task force made up of stakeholder groups from across all types of libraries in Maine. It's very exciting. And one primary purpose for doing this is we do have to put out a request for proposal, an RFP, starting next fiscal year. So to get ready for that, we are collecting input. We need your input into what databases will go into your needs to go into the RFP process. So watch for a survey. Will probably be coming to you next week via all sorts of channels, depending on your stakeholder group. But we are just finalizing that survey this week. It is we do need the needs of your and also your end users, especially. What do you need? What resources do you need in Digital Maine Library? So that's what this survey is going to get at. And so just watch for that next week in the interest of time. I think that's it. I'll pass it back to Jared. You have some questions in the chat.
I do. Barb, I'll go ahead and email you since we are at the end of the webinar, just to give so that we have to wrap it up in the next couple minutes. But if there are no further questions, well, I should say this is your opportunity to ask your happy little questions if you have any that aren't demonstrative in nature, because that would be they require a lot of shuffling of screens. So
there is one other question about where can I find these webinars archived. So let's start with this webinar. Also, you answered the one.
Gale has a number of training resources available through the support site, and we will be posting this webinar both to our YouTube channel and to our Niche Academy.
And when that happens, you all will get the link to it, and we'll also send the link out on MeLib so everyone can have it.
So, any other happy little questions from the audience? Okay, I think that was 11 seconds. I didn't quite count, but thank you all for coming. Again, it's been the Beth and Jared show with a guest appearance by the Digital Maine Library. Thankfully, it decided to make it in the end. And if you do have any further questions about Digital Maine Library, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to help out as I can. But as Beth mentioned earlier, in the webinar. There are going to be a lot more coming, very much more in depth. So if you want to do the deeper dive on some of the resources, make certain that you watch MeLibs for signing up for these webinars and getting registered. And thank you all again. And that is where I shall end the recording.